Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jim Wise. I'm president of Iactp. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. And I see from the screen that we've got several folks that looks like that are signed on via the computer. Some of you may not have audio. Hopefully you do or can get it. If you have questions, if you have the computer screen up, you can send myself or Michael a chat, and we'll do our best to get you your audio up and working. But hopefully you can see the screen, you can follow along with us. We're very pleased this afternoon, our association is, to have Lieutenant Gary Cornelius actually presenting this webinar. Gary's done a lot of work for Iactp over the years and been a member. He was reminding me for well over 30 years. So I really appreciate you, Gary, and appreciate you doing this webinar for us today. And I also, before I forget, I want to, because I know Gary's got lots of good stuff planned for you to share, but I want to make sure that everyone that can hear me now, I want to make sure that you utilize all the resources for Iactp, and hopefully many of you will be able to attend our conference coming up in Omaha, Nebraska this September. So with that being said, encourage you to be as involved with Iactp, chat in your suggestions to us on what we can do to better serve you as trainers out there in the field of corrections. And thank you once again for attending today, and big thanks to Gary Cornelius for doing this for us. So Gary, it's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim, and hello to everybody out there. It's a beautiful day. I'm coming to you live from Williamsburg, Virginia, and I know that we're scattered about all the country, but there's the title slide. And if you ever have to get a hold of me or you'd like some information, I do a lot of training, and now I'm doing instructor development training. Just give me an email, or that's my cell phone number. And today we're going to talk about effective communication and documentation, because we work in an institution profession like no other, and that's corrections, and we deal with a species of human like no other. The criminal offender. If you're in the facility institutional side, you have to maintain safe and secure custody. You work in a building that no one wants to be in. I'm talking about the inmates, and if you're on the probation, parole, community correction side, you're working with them as well, but in a different environment. But every aspect of a lot of aspects of their lives and what services and interactions you do or have with them must be either talked about or written down, preferably, or documented. And it's no matter now if it's electronic or on paper, because a lot of communications now is electronic. But the bottom line is this: if staff does not communicate, little things can turn into big deals. For example, if an inmate has a medical issue and staff is not aware, or somebody didn't write it down or didn't document, or security issues, as you know, escapes or absconding, those are things that offenders do. And then I do suicide prevention, and I stress the fact that the pass on, the special housing law, the reports, they all have to be accurate concerning suicidal inmates. But a little bit about myself. I worked over 27 years at the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center at the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office, and I had several different assignments. But basically, I worked in these areas. Started out working floors in the jail. We called working floors. Some of you would call posts. Some of you would call tiers. Then I went to classification, where documentation was very, very important. For 8 years, I ran jail programs. I was the jail programs director at Fairfax for 8 years. But I also had time in work release, and I also worked in policies and procedures under the sheriff at the time. And like Jim said, I've been an Iactp member since 1986. That's going on 33 years for me. I've been an Iactp member, and if those of you familiar with the journal, I'm the one that writes the 20-minute trainer. And I really enjoy doing that. I really do. And speaking of writing, I'll just mention 2 of the books I'm known for is Art of the Con, Avoiding Offender Manipulation. That's from American Correctional Association. And my latest book is The Correctional Officer Practical Guide by Carolina Academic Press. And you can find them on Amazon. And that's I'm not here to overly plug the books, but I like to mention them. So I hope you get a copy. They can be very, very useful for you. A couple of goals for today. Okay. The first thing I want to talk about refresher and understanding the importance of communication. And I'm not only from the line staff or supervisory staff levels, but from a trainer's perspective. The other thing is I want to talk about the importance of written communication rather than verbal communication and critical matters. What things that have to be written down, either on paper or electronically. And the third thing I'd like to talk about, just 3 simple goals, is learn basic common sense rules about communication and documentation. And I do an in-service class in this, and I've done it for conferences. And you know, people, I read faces when I'm in class, and people think, oh, we're good, we're going to have another report writing class. Well, everybody got report writing when they went through the academy. That's one of the things that that's a basic skill I think we all have, whether you're in the facility side or the communication probation or community corrections probation parole side. But this is not going to be another report writing class. We've all been to those: who, what, when, where, why, how, and action taken. Not going to go into all that. We've had it. We're veterans. We write a lot of reports. We document a lot of things. I just want to give you maybe just a refresher, and you can take the webinar and incorporate it into your training. So it's basically a refresher. So let's get started. Now, to get along in life, we must get our thoughts, feelings, knowledge, and information to other parties. And when I'm doing a class, I say, what about communicating with people have you learned? And they'll say, well, you got to be clear, you got to be if you're talking to somebody, you have to be polite, you have to be quiet, and so forth. But we talk to our parents when we went to school, our teachers, our friends, and we have basic etiquette. Do not interrupt, have good eye contact, speak slowly, think about what you're going to say, listen. What information does the other person need? Organizing your thoughts. And also, we find out that good communications, it takes time. It takes time and a skill that's going to be developed. So when I'm doing a class, you know, I got to bring in the focus of the people who think, you know, it's just another report writing class. I've had this before, yada, yada, yada. So what I would like to do is talk about history, because I'm kind of a history nerd, and living in Williamsburg, there's history all around me. But I bring up this incident here, and I ask, you know, what's that? And somebody always, the Titanic. And the communications played a factor in the Titanic. Not only were ice warnings ignored by the captain, and he had them. I mean, they had them. They had telegram or wireless messages, but there was also a ship 10 miles away that they could not communicate with. And then I put up good old General Custer. And if you know American history, which I think he divided his unit into 3 battalions, and none of them could communicate the other. So we all know how it ended very, very badly for him. And if you're a student of history, Pearl Harbor, the message about the war warning from Washington got there by telegram after the attack. And also the Japanese planes were seen on radar. And the soldier running the radar set called down to the communication center. He said, I think we have a bunch of planes coming in, and we wanted to make you aware of it. And he was told not to worry about it. So communications failed. In history, communications have been proven very, very important, but also they've been proven to let's put it this way, steer events, so to speak. So in communications, I mean, if those of you who work in a jail control center, I would say communications is key for that officer right there. Look at all the screens she has to watch. She has to answer the phone. She keeps a paper log. She is one busy jail officer. She is. But also communications are staff actions and evaluations. Also observing and maintaining custody of inmates. They might be talking about a suicidal inmate. They might be talking about a gang member that just booked in to the jail, and they have to get the information pound. They have to get it written up. They have to have it documented. And mistakes have to be minimal because inmates and offenders are people, and we have a lot of control over them. And we also have a lot of control how they're housed, who they're housed with, what conditions of probation and parole there are, program parameters. We have a lot of say in their lives. So you look at who you have to communicate with. Well, we talked about friends and family and spouses and neighbors, people who you do business with. You go into a restaurant, you have to order your food. You have to be very, very clear on what you want. Teachers, even pets. Your pet has to know what you're telling him or her, whether it's a dog or cat or whatever. Also, colleagues, people we work with, people who we are responsible for, like the offender, like inmates. And we also have to communicate with ourselves. And if you do teach report writing, I'm sure you include in your class who is the best proofer of your work. Well, people ourselves. No, it's another person is the best proofreader of your work. But after you write a report, do your folks go back over the report or the log and say, hey, with somebody else, could I read this? Could I understand it? So there has to be some kind of self-inspection. And we can tell a lot about a person based on the way he or she speaks, writes, and composes a document. Now, communication in the corrections facility is important. And the first thing is corrections officers and related staff rely on information. And the information must be accurate and up to the minute. Because I always told my classification staff that if the sheriff wants to see a file on an inmate, and I'm going to go over to the sheriff's office, and he or she is the big person on the block, and I'm just a good soldier, I'm going to take that file over. The sheriff, the jail superintendent, they have to understand what's that file. So it has to be clear, but it has to be accurate, has to be clear, and has to be up to the minute as much as possible. And as we all know, death, injury, or liability can occur if information is not transmitted or available. Because when you go into internal affairs, or you're called to see the jail superintendent or the sheriff or the department attorney, this is what you don't want to say. You don't say, I did not know, I did not see, nobody told me, I'm not here. And if you have a staff person asking this, I think you better revisit your training. Was I supposed to write down? So when you're sitting in a courtroom in front of the sheriff or giving a deposition, and many of us has been sued, I have, and I've been named in several lawsuits, and I came on top, I'm glad to say. One lawsuit, I had every conversation with this inmate who was suing me documented. Every single time. I would go back to my office, I put it all down, I kept it in a file. And when the attorney came to do a deposition or an interrogatory or questioning me, I gave him a copy of that file, and I was dropped from the suit because it was very, very clear how I communicated with that inmate and what I wrote down, what he said, what I said, and it worked out very, very well for me. So when you see, you know, a lot of people, you know, they text now, but written is still good. Handwritten is sometimes is still effective. But if you have good communication skills, it improves your chances of promotion. A lot of us have been in front of criminal boards, and they look at your reports or how you write things, and it also improves your professional development. How you compose a memorandum, how you directions to your staff, it increases your knowledge and efficiency. I'm the kind of correctional officer that I would rather have a written something in writing. I responded well to things in writing. It improves decision making. If you're a supervisor, you have it in black and white, or you have it on record, and then you'd make decisions. It's consistent enforcement on rules and policies, especially with your special management inmates, your suicidals, your mentally ill, your security threat groups. And a supervisor can look at the documentation and know that the rule policies are being carried out. It does reduce liability. And like at the top, it promotes professionalism. Somebody looks at what you have written or what you've entered in a log, either electronically or in handwriting, they can tell a lot about what kind of professional officer or correctional staff you are. Now, what do we know about communications? Well, you know, there's a perception. We perceive what we would like the message to say, and we expect the other person to understand us. But there's a lot of demands on correctional staff. You're juggling a lot of balls in the air. You're doing a million things at once. There's a lot of demands on you, and you still have to communicate, and that information has to be factual and clear. And two-way is always good, especially verbal. Do you understand? You're a supervisor talking to an officer on a post. Maybe it's maximum security, maybe it's special housing where the mentally ill inmates are. Do you understand? And it's okay to ask a question. And examples are much better. Now, if you're a trainer, war stories, everybody has war stories, but as a veteran trainer once told me, war stories are great for communicating. They're great to do to have a class and use war stories, but they cannot be the whole class. But you know, in your career, especially if you're a trainer, you can throw in examples, and it makes it much better. So we relay the information to, and there's that's a great book, Paul Wyden, Supervising Police Personnel. But we relay information to fellow corrections officers or our fellow staff and other agents and facilities and agency sections that we work with. And when I do a class, so okay, go that you wrote or that law, it doesn't just go in a file. It can go to the sheriff, it can go to the courts, it can go to the inmate's attorney, other law enforcement agents. Many of us have handled transfers and so forth, and we send all the invitation with them. Courts, probation, and parole. I had a good relationship when I was in classification with the POs, the local district 29 in Fairfax. And they would say, what's he been doing in the jail? How has he been acting? That information has to be very, very clear because it impacts the inmate's conditions of probation or probation, or the parole board used to come up, and or the pre-sentence report indicates, you know, what the sentence the judge is going to hand down. Supervisors, performance evaluations. And I would look very carefully at my staff on the documentation, how they wrote up their interviews, how they filed their the reports they wrote, and that would figure into my probation, my performance evaluation. I'm sorry, and also cannot discount the media, because the media, it seems when you're in a jail, the media will come to your jail if there's a bad situation, like an escape, contraband coming in, staff having sexual relations with inmates. The media will be there. They might want information and so forth. So the communication has to be well presented, but the media is always looking for a story. So let's go how we communicate. Well, first there's oral. We talk to people. And there's written. We write it down either electronically or on paper. There's nonverbal. You can tell by that picture she's upset about something. And electronic. So we have oral, written, and electronic, as well as the nonverbal. And times have changed, and the ways we communicate have been modified. Gone are the days of tossing keys to relief and verbally passing on information. Okay, you got the floor, I'm gone, here's what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Those days are gone. That's a very dangerous practice anyway, to give verbal pass on. And we will discuss all of these and how they apply to a correctional setting. So let's talk about oral. Fast relay of information. We talk. Some of us talk very fast. Immediate response. We can tell if the person is picking up what we're laying down, so to speak. The mistakes easily corrected. Do you mean this? No, I mean this. And we correct them right away. More people relayed through. Distortion. Remember in elementary school, the teacher would whisper something in the first student's ear, and by the time it got to the rest of the room, it was distorted. So the more people oral communication is relayed through, it is distorted, and information may be left out, but it's not easily retrieved. So if you're sitting in front of IA and I told them this, well, there's no record of it. It's just your word. The problem is in our profession is that you do have lazy staff. They are distracted. They might think it's just easier to tell somebody something verbally. What I used to do on my pass on the floor, I'd have like a running notebook. I had just a plain old legal pad and a pen, and I would write stuff down. And then when my relief came on, I could put it on my floor log, or I could give him a copy of what I've written down, but I had it in writing. So something you might want to think about. Also, oral and verbal can be emotional. You can be hurried, you can be rushed, you can be upset. And if you are, it can be unclear. Information can be omitted. You might forget something, and it can be misunderstood or taken the wrong way. So when you're communicating, one thing you'd like to do is you like to maintain good comportment, focusing, command presence. You might want to ask the person, do you understand? Now, not everything is written down. You do pass on things verbally, but ask, if they're nodding, they're verbally agreeing with you. And if you are getting the communication, you can nod or verbally agree, but watch the interruptions, because in jail work, you're interrupted constantly. Think about the message, focus. One thing is, don't display nervous habits. Some people have their pens, some people drum the fingers, and so forth. It's distracting. And I'm thinking in terms of, like, if you're having a meeting, and as supervisors, we have a lot of meetings, and you're going over things verbally. You might want to follow these guidelines. And if you're not sure, get clarification or ask. If you're not sure, you ask. If the person you're talking to isn't sure, get them to ask. And remember, if you do write a report, it can show up in a lot of places. And we just went over those, mainly in court. Okay, let's talk about written. It's tangible. You can see it. You can feel it. It's paper. It's stored and filed appropriate system by the appropriate staff. Now, research aid for the sheriff's office and inmates would sue us. This is in the days before the internet. And word processing was in its infancy. I think it was WordPerfect was the big one. And I remember going over to the warehouse, climbing up a ladder on a shelf, you know, a good shelf, I forget how many feet off the floor it was, getting a file box with the date on it, and hopefully the shift report I need, or the incident report I need, or the pass-on log, or whatever was in that box. So appropriate system by the appropriate staff for your storage and filing. But also written illustrates the problems very, very clearly, and we're going to get into that. It also enables us to think who's doing what and when. It's a permanent record, and it gives direction for a further course of action: discipline, administrative segregation, criminal charge, and so forth. So the active written documentation, what does it do? It relays information. No matter what duties those two folks have, what they're going to encounter, and they encounter a lot in one shift. And it goes to a lot of different places. Okay, let's talk about nonverbal. What we see says a lot about what we understand. Sometimes verbal intonation. If I have a staff member that's upset and angry, their verbal intonation is going to reflect that, and I'm going to see more emotion than I am probably going to see content. But the body language too, this officer comportment, and this is also for the community correction side, the POs. When you look professional, you act professional, you speak professionally, your communications are clear, people respect that. The inmates will respect that. And also your post, your desk. And I've seen some jail desks that are very, very neat. They could be a display in Office Depot. And I've also seen some that are very, very sloppy. And that says a lot too about your communications. Now let's talk about electronic, because that is the age we live in. And many communicate mainly through texting. We're the generation coming up, they're not going to use a pen so much. They're going to use a keyboard or a text box on an iPhone. And one of the things I'd like to talk about and spend just a little time on is that the need for handwriting skills and the ability to take notes. Because when I'm doing a class, I say, you've just handled an inmate suicide attempt, or you've just handled an inmate assault, or you found contraband, and you have to write that report, but you're short staffed, you're working the post by yourself, the phone's ringing off the hook, the sergeant wants to know what's going on, inmates are banging at the door demanding your attention. I used to have that pad that I told you about. I would take notes on it and sketches, and I would write down things that I knew I'd have to put into the report later. So you have to have handwriting skills and the ability to take notes. And that's one thing I think you can incorporate in your training. Some text or email, more interpersonal communication is better sometimes, but sometimes it's note-taking. And I had a classification one time. I had an inmate going into a cell block, and I got a call from the post deputy. He said, "Lieutenant, don't put this guy in there." And I said, "What's up?" He says, "He doesn't get along with another guy in the block. Says there's going to be a fight. He hasn't even gone to the door yet." I said, "Can you give me a report?" He says, "No, I got the food card. I got the medics up here. I'm working short." I said, "Send me an email." So send me an email real quick, and we'll documentation. Or he could have written a note, and I would have put it in the file. So there is a need for handwriting skills. Now, directions. Communications can be down, supervisors to line staff. They can be up, line staff supervisor, or they can be across, colleague to colleague, section to section. So let's talk about that. Okay, this is a case, and to keep on time, I'm going to paraphrase somewhat, but you can see it. Case, but it's still effective. An inmate threatened suicide. He ingested a lot of pills. They took him to the hospital. They pumped his stomach. The hospital doctor completed a report, which was placed into a sealed envelope. Transporting officer, who did not know the contents of the envelope, took the inmate back to the jail. He left it on the booking desk because he thought a supervisor will come along and he'll pick it up. Nobody looked inside the envelope. And later, the inmate assaulted a jail officer, tried to escape. The inmate was then placed into segregation, and a short time after being placed into segregation, he killed himself. They opened up the envelope. The psychiatrist's report diagnosed the inmate as suicidal, recommended that jail take suicide cautions. And the inmate's family took it to court, successfully sued the jail on the grounds of deliberate indifference. Very, very embarrassing. Very embarrassing. And Bill Collins is a good friend of mine. He writes a lot of good stuff, and that's a really great book. Okay. But you can see where this is going. This is another thing. Thomas versus Cook County. 32-year inmate booked into a jail, elevated blood pressure. He became dizzy, vomiting, unable to hold on any food, could not talk to fellow inmates or walk. Several inmates found that they wrote several medical request forms for him. They claimed there was answers, and not all inmates are lying. They also said that they told COs about the inmate's condition. He was convulsing, unconscious, and the inmate cellmate told the officer on duty, and the shift sergeant arrived 30 minutes later, no response. Paramedic was called, arrived 30 minutes after that. Delay occurred because they couldn't find his paperwork. Transported to the hospital, he died of meningitis. The plaintiff alleged that the jail had been inadequate medical staff and broken video monitors, but the crux of the case is this: there is no system in place to monitor the inmate medical requests. Many medical staff did not have keys to the lock boxes where the requests were placed. They couldn't get them. They were not turning in their medical requests, their encounter forms. And the supervisors didn't know when nicks were on the floors. So the jury said, hey, this is not good, and awarded the deceased inmate's mother over $4 million. Your facility heads, your agency heads, your sheriffs, you don't need that headache. And this is from the Correctional Law Reporter, Civic Research Institute, very, very publication. But here's a little exercise I do in class. And those of you who are going to download the presentation, feel free to use it. But I put this up real quick and read it. 18, 20 hours, almost at the end of your shift. You've got a rowdy arrestee, flooded his cell, another shooting profanities, the wagon, police cars rolling in with 5 gang members. They have to be kept separate. Maintenance has 2 of your cells shut down. Okay, you can read all that if you use my cursor. That is sometimes a typical day in a jail receiving. All of this is going on. All of this is going on. And you're almost at the end of that 12-hour day. So now you got a new inmate. Joe Baker, 23, tried to kill his girlfriend. She standoff with waving a gun at police. Suicide by cop. On heroin, diabetic, antidepressants, repeatedly kicked the cruiser window, bandage cut on his right thigh, refused to answer questions, started vomiting. He stuffed up his toilet, flooded the cell, got all of this going on, okay? And then I take it off the screen, and this is a very, very effective exercise. And if you want information on my class, just give me a buzz or email me. But anyway, so you got all this going on, plus what's going on, and what I just showed you, and you got to write up your pass on. You got to sit down and write up all of your pass, and it has to be good, and it has to be clear, and it has to be accurate. So where will we be without effective, clear communication? Purposes: defense against complaints and litigation, answers any questions from the court, enhances up and down communications, and supports accreditation. Those of you who are auditors, you need that documentation. Also, litigation. Event seems unforgettable, but our memories fade. So if you have a serious incident, your memory's going to fade. That report's going to help you. And when a suit is filed, the first thing he wants reports. He wants the documentation. Staff testimony without good notes and reports can look very, very bad. Litigation, the use of force, special conditions of confinement such as isolation, ammunition to counteract motions in court. Because I believe in quotes. Inmate says you are no good, yada, yada, blah, blah. I want that in a quote in my report. So that can go into court. And as you know, documentation can be brought in on a trial proceeding, criminal or civil. So all of this litigation, criminal or civil, has to have good communications. You cannot ignore it. And internal affairs, and can aid a neutral investigator to ascertain the facts. If you have a death in custody, you usually call in an outside agency to do an objective investigation. They need the documentation as well. Reports, logs, so forth. Now here's your critical incidents. Okay, and this is a good refresher for your academy classes or your in-service roll call. Assaults, possession of manufacture of contraband, escape or an escape plot, irrational, unusual behavior. And I think we all know what they are, but there's some listed there. These all require documentation. Civil misconduct. That we live in the age of PREA. Major and minor rule violations, maintenance breakdowns, equipment failures, any acts that jeopardize the security of the jail, unrest, disturbances, and you, for those of you on the PO side, anything unusual about your client, what's going on in the home, confidential informants. If you work in an institution, you have them. They'll come up and give you information. Medical problem. Services, especially given to inmates in segregation. So you go, I'll just go over those. And those. Now, the written word, one of the best tools that a correctional officer has. And we talked about the value of communications to your career and the safe running of the jail. Neatness. That is not neatness. What if IA says to you, Gary, I need your notes. You took notes, you sketched it out, you wrote down inmates. I want to attach that to your report. It's not what I want it to look like. Or dog-eared forms, never taken out of the binder, the law, because some places still use paper. Or the good old coffee rings. They're not the Olympic rings, they're coffee rings. Or what if your posts look like that? Neatness counts. Neatness counts. Documentation properly written, logged in, proofed by whom, like best proof or someone else. You could have your folks say, hey, I just wrote this up. Does this make sense to you? Can you take a look at it? Reviewed and forwarded, filed, and retrieved. You have to be able to go back and get it. Takes of good documentation, common sense, initial entries neatly, legibly, include your name, badge number. Do not keep adding information to a dog-eared, worn-out form. Transcribe it, file the old stuff. Cautions and instructions on a log should be initialed by a supervisor or qualified civilian staff. And in Fairfax, we had a top-notch mental health unit. Record pass on information in writing. How do you do that? That's up to your policies and procedures, your forms. Best way is writing. Remarks of inmates heard or reported, put them in quotes. You'll probably have to swear under oath that you heard the remarks. Quotes are great because the inmate, they're nice and neat and humble, nice miss, and they're going to want bad quotes. You did say this, didn't you, miss? You did call the deputy no good, blah, blah, blah. Quotes are good. Witness statements are also very, very good. It looks better in court. Description of evidence. If you write a label, make sure people can read it. That should be on your report. What happened? Paint a picture. Paint a clear picture. And I'll put up two examples. Really, I'm keeping an eye on time here. But paint a picture. Mentally ill, segregated inmate pacing about in a cell, talking to himself, shaking his head side to side. We've all seen this. You try to talk to him from outside the cell, but he does not acknowledge your presence in any fashion. So you would have to paint that picture. So somebody reading the report, visualize it. You don't want to say, oh, the inmate's crazy. You're not qualified to make that judgment. You want to paint a picture of exactly what you observed and saw and heard. Two inmates in a cell block, closely facing each other with fists clenched. Other inmates are laughing. Both the inmates are breathing heavily. I mean, you have a canteen in your jail, you have a problem. My canteen is missing. I know you took it. That quote should be in there. Should be very, very clear. Very, very clear. Now, a couple of tips. Never wait till the next day to come back and do a report. No. Your memory starts fading probably a half hour after the incident. Get relief if necessary. And that's a layman's view. I don't have any clinical stuff on that, but you got a lot to do. Your memory starts to fade. Get relief if necessary. If you have to write up something very, very important, get with your supervisor, see if a relief can be arranged for you. You could go to a quiet place, collect your thoughts, look at your notes, your diagram, whatever you have, and write it up. That's pretty much common sense. Time, that's pretty much common sense as well. Facts only, not opinions. Not opinions. There's some people working in our line of work, they have master's degrees. Hey, that's great. But say somebody says, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. Well, you're not a practicing psychologist. Report the facts only, not opinions. And notebook, I had that little legal pad in my briefcase. It worked well for me. Personal documentation file, anything really serious that you wrote, please make a copy of that. When I retired, I waited about 2 to 3 years before I cleaned mine out because an inmate could still sue me after I retired. Anything that was really, really important, use of force, charging criminally, deathly, get a copy of what you wrote, make a copy of what you wrote, and keep it on file. Writing problems, jargon, and shortcuts. No place for them. Be formal. Missing documents, oh, don't want that. Falsifications. Many officers, I teach an avoiding liability class and a management class, and many officers and staff who have gotten in trouble have lied on their reports and falsified things. Very, very bad. No checking or proofing by supervisors. Supervisors have to stay the extra half hour to look over all the paperwork and all the documentation. That's what this comes with, the stripes and the bars on your collar. Stripes on the sleeves, bars on the collar. Also, poor academy training and communications skills should be, I'm not saying my class the best, but it should really emphasize in the academy. But a lot of academies have report writing. It's more than that. And I hope if you've been picking up what I'm laying down, it is. Okay, a couple of common sense rules as we coast to the end here. All right, people in jail or in the institution can get hurt and or die if staff does not have clear, accurate, timely information. Common sense. You have people that are mentally ill, medical problems, suicidal. Staff responsible for the custody of that person has to have clear, accurate, and timely information. Rule number 2. What good is all the information that is documented if no one can read it? Now, he could be checking the reports, or he might be staring at a report going, who in the hell wrote this? I can't read this. So you have to meet, and we talked about that. It covers you and the agency, protecting you from negative actions and consequences, and the agency from non-compliance with standards. In 2 years, I did accreditation. So I had a huge file drawer with all the standards. Each standard has a file. And I had to put that documentation in there. And it has to be very neat because you're going to have auditors from maybe ACA or the state or the feds, federal. You're going to have auditors. They're going to see how standards are backed up. Documentation does that. This is one of my favorites here. Okay, if something was not written down, properly authorized, it did not happen, and you don't want to just going, I don't know. What are you telling me? And one of the people in my when I was co-presenting instructor development last week from one of the big regional jails around the Tidewater, said if it's not on paper, it's vapor. And I didn't put that on a slide, but it's a cute saying. If it's not on paper, it's vapor. And I said, can I steal that from you? And he said, yes. I said, so I did. Write a report as soon as possible after the event. And that's where your relief comes in. You need to write this report up. Sarge, can I get somebody to dispel me for at least maybe a half an hour minimum or longer so I can sit and start working on this? Good supervisors, they know all the balls that you juggle in the air. They know the demands on you. They'll work with you. Common sense rules of good communication. Listen more than talk. Allow people to talk and give them space. Because not everything is, we do a lot of verbal too. Ask questions. Be patient. Some people, I especially when I'm presenting, to talk more quick, to speak more quickly. But some people they speak at a slower pace. Be patient. Ease up on the war stories, especially if you're a field training officer. Communicate what you have to do: policies, procedures, report writing, log entries. But war stories are great, but they are not a lesson. Let's put it. They should be limited. Don't take shortcuts. They may save you time, your view, but they will not save you hassles later on. I'd rather have a well-written factual report with a lot of information in it than picking up one saying, I don't understand this. What do you mean by that? When the superintendent, IA, sheriff, department attorney asks for an inmate's file, it must contain to-the-minute information, and it doesn't matter tired. You want that report to be factual, clear, and understandable. The report, the log, whatever you're documenting. And shortcuts, no shortcuts. Because the report can end up there, can end up there, documentation can end up there. It can end up there. The law firm, good old lawyers, courtroom, or on the local news. So I'm not saying your facility is going to hand out internal documentation and communication, but you never know. I've seen some news reports that have had jail security video, and I'm wondering, how did they get that? Or your agency head or your public information officer, we want to be transparent, we want to be cooperative, and they might give them a redacted copy of a report or something, and you want that to be neat. So that wraps it up. And the question is, what are you going to do differently? And I really thank you for your time and attention. And if there's anything at all I can ever help with in training, I've been a trainer for about over 35 years. And I'm still at it. Okay, Iactp is a great organization, but if there's anything I can do, anything at all, there's my contact information. I'm an adjunct at Georgetown University, but there's my email, aejinstructor@hile.com, and there is my cell number. Okay, just feel free to send me an email or pick up the phone, and I'll try to help you the best way I can, because learning is ongoing, and Iactp is a great organization, and please contact me if you need any assistance at all or any advice at all. Okay, and I really thank you for attending the webinar and your attention and listening. Mike, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, and I'll pipe it out now, Mike. This is Jim Wiseman, once again, president of Iactp. Thank you very much, Gary, for your presenting this to our association this afternoon, and thanks to all of you folks for attending. I really appreciate it. I know Michael's going to come on board just a minute, and I'm going to tell you all that this webinar will be available. It's recorded. It's on our website. I just want to put another plug in as well. And Gary's so right. This is the only organization out there that caters solely to the corrections training profession, correctional trainers. So thank you, folks. You're in the right place if you're a correctional trainer. And our conference, again, September 23 through 25, Omaha, Nebraska this year. Hope to see most of you there. And once again, thanks for being here. Thank you, Gary, and I'll give you just a round of applause myself. Thank you very much. Very, very good information, sir. And Michael, any closing remarks and for the participants?
I'll be sending out an email later today with a link to the video of the webinar, along with a certificate of participation for those that were part of the program this afternoon. And you've got Gary's email if you want to request a copy of his PowerPoint. And also my email will have an evaluation link. If you could take just a minute, it's very short, but it helps kind of guide us in developing our future webinars. So we'd appreciate your feedback. If anybody has questions, this would be a good time.
Mike?
Yes.
Is there anybody in the chat room looking at the chat? So looks like
I don't see any questions.
There's no on questions that I can see.
No.
Nope. Okay. Thank you,
Yes.
Michael. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, thanks.
Bye-bye, Gary. Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Okay, have a good day, everybody.